Welcome back, Ultimate Weapons. It's the Night Sky Prince again. Back in 2005 at the E3 preceding the release of PlayStation 3, a technical demonstration for Final Fantasy VII, as if it were remade into a modern game, was shown off. And while Square Enix had absolutely no plans for a remake at the time, once fans got even the smallest taste of what a fully realized Final Fantasy VII could be like, there was absolutely no turning back for them. However, with the troubled development cycles of the Fabula Nova Crystallis games, there was absolutely no way that they could do it. Final Fantasy XIII, Final Fantasy Versus 13, and Final Fantasy Agito 13 were eating all the company's top-tier development resources. In particular, many of the key staff most apt to create a Final Fantasy VII remake were stuck in limbo on Versus 13. If we go all the way back to 2002, when Before Crisis Final Fantasy VII began its development, at the time, a financially struggling Square Enix was looking to expand currently popular Final Fantasy entries to make money off things people already loved. This was a pretty low point for Square, with the Spirits Within bombing and them having to merge with their rival Enix. Not only that, but making Final Fantasy X-2 reminded the team that they did not need to stick with completely serious traditional JRPGs. This is what enabled the creation of the compilation. In November of 2002, Yoshinori Kitase was asked to comment on the possibility of a sequel to Final Fantasy VII. Quote, "A sequel to Final Fantasy VII? Kitase said while laughing. In truth, there would be many who'd like such a game. Nomura, who's working on Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, included. Many of the Square staff participated in the development of Final Fantasy VII, and the memories are strong. Additionally, expressing the world of Final Fantasy VII using today's technology would certainly be interesting. However, Final Fantasy VII still has many fans. We could not make a bad product." So in 2003, the compilation of Final Fantasy VII was announced. Visual Works, the team that had been previously responsible for all of the pre-rendered cutscenes in Final Fantasy VII, leading all the way up until Final Fantasy X, finally had some free resources, so they jumped in to aid the compilation project. And initially, what they had in mind was in fact to build a sequel to Final Fantasy VII. However, this idea of a Final Fantasy VII-2 was never able to manifest. Nomura makes it quite clear by saying, quote, "First of all, we started off from the project that Visual Works was handling at the time. But they just can't make their own game. We tried to see if we could make it into a game, but it wasn't possible due to a number of factors. As a result, we decided to stick with the original plan and work on it as a movie production. The development isn't too different from the way we develop movies that get used in our games, but the schedule is a bit tight. It's strange to think now that Advent Children was almost turned into a game. However, due to Visual Works being unable to make a game as they're primarily a CGI studio, the continuation of Final Fantasy VII as a game series had to be held off for the time being. However, that didn't stop two other games from within the compilation of Final Fantasy VII from yet again attempting to tease that Cloud and the gang would once again have to return to save the world. Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus introduced a brand new antagonist character named Genesis Rhapsodos, who was literally based on Japanese singer, songwriter, and actor Gact. Not only was his likeness based on Gact, Gact was the voice actor for Genesis in the Japanese version of Crisis Core. He also sings the theme song Redemption for Dirge of Cerberus. In Crisis Core, Genesis played a very prominent role, serving essentially as the final boss in a place where Sephiroth himself could not serve. Despite the seeming defeat of Genesis at the end of Crisis Core, during the ending of Dirge of Cerberus, Genesis is shown fully revived, saying that he still has much work to do. And by the way, that's not CGI alone. They literally used Gact live action over a green screen. They really wanted to drive home that this wasn't some ordinary villain, that this was in fact the pop star in the flesh. And then yeah, he basically just flies off, and we never get any sense made out of this scene, even over 12 years later. If the compilation of Final Fantasy VII were to be considered canon in its full, then at this point, Final Fantasy VII still, to this day, would have been left off on that cliffhanger. It made people wonder for years if there would eventually have been a Final Fantasy VII-2. Square Enix at that point was still indicating that they were interested in creating a story continuation of Final Fantasy VII, with CEO at the time, Yoichi Wada, stating back in 2009 2006. While development and release of compilation titles was still ongoing, the compilation could see an active franchise until 2017 with the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII's release. Lo and behold, we're in 2018 now, and Final Fantasy VII Remake is still waiting to release. With that said, it still seems like something that Square Enix has in their plans to do one day. Just like with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, of course, they can always push this button if they ever get in any financial trouble. In fact, Hajime Tabata, the director of Crisis Core and Final Fantasy XV, was asked if he would ever be interested in taking over Final Fantasy VII Remake, and he gave a fairly curious response. Quote, "It's such a special numbered game that I don't think I can remake that one. There's so many fans out there. If I were asked to satisfy all those fans, I don't think that's something I can 100% do. If Square asked me to make a new Final Fantasy and take it in that direction, I'd be happy to accept that one. But if they asked me to remake Final Fantasy VII, to release it as if it were a modern game, just released today, no, I don't think that's something I can do. I think the only people that can do that are Mr. Yoshinori Kitase and Mr. Tetsuya Nomura. Now if they asked me to do a Final Fantasy VII-2, that might be different." Tabata interjected the idea of Final Fantasy VII-2 on his own accord. It seems as though the reasoning may have come from his own mind, because the idea of him directing a Final Fantasy VII-2 may have actually been an internal discussion at some point. While Final Fantasy VII Remake is a long ways away, and the idea of a Final Fantasy VII-2 is an even further off concept, it is still quite a curious one. It's something that they thought about doing when they started creating Advent Children, and they even went as far as to retcon Final Fantasy VII's story with the possibility of inserting a new villain, and then leaving off the cliffhanger for a series to pick back up. While I wouldn't mind seeing a Final Fantasy VII-2 one day, I just hope it isn't what the compilation was teasing with Genesis. So what do you Ultima Weapons think? Do you want to see a Final Fantasy VII-2 one day? Or do you honestly feel like Final Fantasy VII Remake is enough to satisfy you with the series for a lifetime? Subscribe, click the bell icon, and let me know in the comments below. And if you really love Final Fantasy VII, be sure to check out our Facebook group, Ultima, Square Enix plus JRPGs, where the closest thing we have to a pop star villain is probably me. Link in the description below.